Hello everybody, this is Girlfoxgirl. Well, since I just ended my LP of Amnesia, A Machine for Pigs, I thought I'd end it with a little recap. So I wrote this quick review of what I thought about the game to sum it all up. The really short version? I was disappointed, and I think with good reason. The long version? Well, let's take a look. I'll start off with my biggest problem with the game. It wasn't scary. I can count the number of times I felt legitimately scared. The encounter at the gas pump, the jump scare in the church when the pig seems to walk by for a second, and during the real encounter in the church before I saw what was actually attacking me. 3 times, man. Now, it's a pretty common complaint, I've come to find out. I've heard some people respond to this by saying something along the lines of, well, the game was good anyway, and it didn't need to be scary. It had great atmosphere and an engaging plot. If you're one of those people who need cheap scares to have fun, find it elsewhere. This game is for those who like to think. Yet, I don't think that's a legitimate defense for this game for me. Why? Well, for one, I think the game actually was intended to be scary. For one, it's a sequel to Amnesia: The Dark Descent, arguably the scariest commercially available video game. It comes with baggage. Expectations naturally come with following that act. And they tethered themselves to the original game intentionally, what with the orb, the relation to Alexander, and that one note that totally references Paint the Man, Cut the Lines, and etc. To be honest, it didn't really need that connection. Really, it was all unnecessary, though appreciated on my part. For one, the whole plot of the first game was that those who mess with the orb get fucked up by the shadow. Excepting those with pure intentions and quick apologies like Agrippa. So, where was the shadow when Mandus touched the orb and saw into the future? I'm not entirely sure on that point. It seemed to me that because of that, and because most connections were made in notes, that this game could totally have been its own standalone creation if it had wanted to be. And it would face very few consequences of plot changes if it had been so. So I think it accepted its connection to Amnesia and even embraced it. And that game terrified me. And I wanted more of that when I heard that it would have a sequel. And please, don't think that I'm just being biased because I love the original. That I might simply dislike a sequel for not being the original game I loved. No, I swear I'm not that way. Why? Because I loved the Justine DLC. I adored that game. Heck, I thought that game was perhaps even better than the original. I found it scary, I felt it had atmosphere, I loved the story even more than that of the original, and it proved to me that the developers not only could handle making a sequel, they could also handle making a very short game and yet still make it good and engaging. So I didn't play this game with biased intentions to hate it for what it is. Rather, I was expecting something like what I had been given twice before. Scares along with atmosphere and a unique story. On top of that, the game was advertised to be scary. I was one of those people that waited with bated breath for this game. I watched all the trailers when they came out. I checked the main website every time they leaked a screenshot, and etc. The trailer made the game out to be scary, and when it wasn't, I felt a bit misled. Also, you might have noticed, during the end credits, they thanked the mass of piggies that did scream for them. I think all in all, this all just suggests that the game developers did intend for this game to be scary and totally thought that it was going to scare people. I don't think it was just about good atmosphere and plot. And in that regard, I think they failed. So, where, in my opinion, did they fail to scare? In monster design, most of all, is my answer. The man-pigs simply did not scare me. I don't think I can legitimately define what makes one monster scary and another one boring. The concept of fear is something unexplainable in the time I like to spend in this review, but I can at least try to paint a bit of a picture. I wasn't expecting them to be so short, for one. It just kept jumping over them. Another thing, I was expecting them to be more. The title of the game, the build-up, it all implied pig monsters, but I wanted a bit more, to be honest, than the first image that popped up in my head. Heck, fan-made speculative sketches looked a lot better in hindsight than the actual game designs, I thought. And the way the suitors, grunts, and brutes looked, I thought they would have gotten creative. Or maybe, how about a creepy way of moving? That would have been really cool. I always want more crawling in video games. Like things crawling towards you really fast. I think that's a really freaky, uncanny valley inducing method of locomotion. But I just wasn't impressed with what they gave me. But that was mild compared to the water monsters. Seriously, guys? Really? You took the Kernick, or however it's pronounced, and you gave it sparks, and you served me that on a platter, expecting me to be happy with it? Nah. No rehashes that lacking in subtlety are allowed. It's a recycled design that made me stop playing for a moment just to sigh at it. And I laugh at the explanation that those were failed man-pig experiments that were torn from their physical forms at random for short bursts. Totally different from So it's totally different from the water monsters from the original. Developers, I understand time constraints and that the water monsters in the first game were scary, but that just wasn't fun at all to see them like that again. And Tesla Pig. Okay, I appreciate that the design was finally creative. Now, if the normal pig monsters were even that creative, with an abnormal method of movement and a design that differed from my mental image of the phrase pig monster, I would have been perfectly happy. I'd love it. But it was a dainty boss. Honestly, the way it was handled was really what ruined it. The design I was happy with, but the boss fight was just pathetic. I mean, maybe others had more fun with it. But personally, I solved half of the fight by pulling that lever down even before I saw that the Tesla Pig was in the room. Then I pulled the other lever and he was down. It was just silly. And the maze chase scene? I ran around it and finished it in no time flat. No wrong turns, no pain, no risk. Once again, I think it could have been okay for other people if they messed up, were slower, or didn't beat it without even realizing it. But the very fact that my experience could have been so easily ruined makes me unhappy with the Tesla Pig. I'm sorry, guys. You got so close to my approval that time. But enough of that. Let's talk about that defense of the game being more about atmosphere and good because of that, in light of the monsters. I disagree now, but at first I admit I would have agreed. I'd compliment the game in everything up until those man-pigs. I was legitimately very worried. They built up tension like champs. Frictional has proven to be masters at it, and this game was no exception. If you think anything up until then was scary, I might disagree. Those creepy kids weren't scary per se, but I think they were excellent tension builders. I got more and more on edge, and it looked like the game was going in all the right directions. Along these lines, I think the atmosphere was exactly on par with the original. In The Dark Descent, I was on edge within minutes of first playing, and I was just that way with this one, too. It created its own little world with objects and furniture, etc., that I would even say were even better looking than the original, and that realism thus created a more immersive environment than the original game. The best works of horror in general are the ones that avoid cheap jump scares, but rather take their time to get you nice and buttered up, with all that nail-biting tension before turning all that discomfort into a big scare. And this game was doing it perfectly. It was great. I was so ready. Yet for all those that defend this game for being about atmosphere, I would say the atmosphere was ruined halfway through by the damn monster design. I immediately lost all tension after the monsters were shown, because I lost all sense of risk. Horror requires risk. It is simply a necessity. Why should I think, oh god, this place looks like a monster might come out. Oh god, is it around that corner over there? Oh crap, oh crap, oh crap. Will this action trigger it? All of that just kind of turned into, meh. So what if it does show up? It's a silly little thing. Plus, I can survive at least 2 hits, maybe 3, and I can outrun it, or I can just jump over it like I did last time. I lost all sense of danger that the atmosphere in the beginning was so perfect at building up. For that reason, the game didn't even have the atmosphere part done right all the way through. I don't think that atmosphere argument is good enough to defend the game because atmosphere doesn't require sacrifice. Take the first game. It had wonderful build-up too, yet it knew how to handle risk. It started off slow, it introduced a monster with a scary design, and then it got even harder and increased the risk when it added the one-shotting brutes, and even placed an enemy that wouldn't patrol or move out of the way at all. Take the game Limbo, for instance. Limbo is a great game that was also all about atmosphere. It had a minimalist art style that was incredible to look at and also very immersive. You felt so curious, and you had absolutely no idea what creative thing was around the corner. It all meshed well with the tone and puzzles and etc. too. Yet that fact didn't carry the game entirely. No, it was filled with good gameplay too, which made for puzzles that challenged yet weren't impossible. It kept me engaged as I tried to get things right the first time, and I enjoyed learning from my previous deaths. This game, however, sacrificed gameplay for atmosphere, and I didn't like that one bit. So what did this game do exactly? It tried to be different. I remember reading that the developers tried to make it so players of the first game wouldn't be able to use their same tricks on the new monsters. I was intrigued and excited by that idea, actually. Little did I know, though, they did it completely backwards. If you're going to remove either hiding or running, I'd say remove running. The best is probably having a focus on hiding with a bit of running, especially while being chased, for the climax of terror. Yet this game decided to remove one of those aspects completely, and I think that they chose wrong. They removed the need to hide. I never once actually hid and waited in the darkness for a monster to pass me by, praying they wouldn't notice me. When I did that kind of thing in the first game, I had instances of my hands shaking from my strained nerves and my jaw hurting from being clenched so hard. In this one, I was simply faster than the wall, so I could jump over it, since it's so short. Once again, this greatly reduced the risk that makes any horror game scary. Hiding could more risk. If they had designed the monster to be faster than I was, an example of choosing hiding over running, it would have been great. It would have given me a huge scare at first when my usual tricks failed and I lost a terrifying chase. And then next time I would be forced into hiding, making me very afraid to turn corners in fear of being caught off guard without a hiding spot. Yet the way they ended up going with just made corners just fine, and the risk was pretty much null. It was simply the wrong choice, I think. Another thing I want to talk about, gameplay was severely hindered by altering the physics. Once again, I think this can relate back to changing it up from the first game, and I admit, it got me. Many players used objects to barricade grunts and brutes to gain more time to run. I tried this method in the new game. It failed. So it did make the game fresh and new from the old one, I admit. But not in a good way. Come on, man. Objects just phase through the monsters? Who thought that was a good idea? If you wanted to scare the crap out of me when my object throwing didn't stun the monster like I expected, make it bounce off of him like a Kleenex off a charging elephant. Do not make it through him like he's some kind of ghost of bacon past. It broke any sense of immersion I might have had at that point. Similarly, I couldn't pick things up. It was part of the fun of the first game. It was enjoyable to play with the stuff in the castle. Here it was actively discouraged because the developers didn't program the game to be able to handle you playing with stuff. Oh god, how many times did things sink into the floor, go spazzing up into the ceiling, get stuck in other objects, and etc. during my playthrough? It was ridiculous, man. I'm gonna make a montage of it just to show you guys. And once again, there goes any atmosphere when I see a chair bonk against an invisible wall and sink into the floor. A related point, and I think an even stronger one, I think that it ruined puzzles for me. Ruined them, seriously. Toward the beginning, you notice some strange fuses in kind of the storage area. Then later they come into play when you replace a broken one. The point was supposed to be that you had to backtrack because you needed one more. Hell, there was even a scare there. I missed it entirely. And why? Because the fuses were the only thing you could touch, so I knew that they were going to be important. Have you ever watched an episode of Scooby-Doo, like one of the really old ones? Try it, and play a game of guess which object is going to move. You can tell which one will, because you can tell the difference between what is painted into the backdrop picture and what is a separate animated object. This game is the equivalent to that game. I took all the fuses with me because I knew they were a puzzle piece even before I knew there was a flippin' puzzle to begin with. It just wasn't a good idea to make it so obvious. The physics bugs ruined my immersion, the puzzles, and even a good chunk of the fun I could have had. Okay, I want to take a moment here to comment on fun. I will admit, there was more fun in this game than the last. Yes, I'm actually a machine for pigs. I don't hate it entirely. It made me laugh and smile to sabotage the machine. I seriously enjoyed breaking things and etc. I never got that in the first game, and I think it actually would have done it some good to have included that kind of thing. Comic relief after all that amazing tension would have made me laugh so hard, because of my frayed nerves. Justine had a bit of it, sure, but I felt like I experienced intentional fun in this game more often than intentional in-game fun in the last games. Sure, even more of that fun was laughing at Amnesia Machine for Pigs and not with it, but I do feel like some points were intentional for silly fun, and I kinda like that. Another point I want to take a moment to compliment, they were smart when they brought in sex. I know I might sound like a complete psychopath when I say this, but people getting killed just doesn't do it for me like it used to. I've seen it done so many ways. Unless you get creative to disturb me, there is a limit to what will affect me if done to a character I don't know very well. And because this game didn't have enough time to let you get to know the victims, I think it chose a very good method. It just brought in the sex. And that can be very disturbing, and it did creep me out in a perfectly lovely way. Finding those notes where Mandus writes about sex, for example, fondling himself in the mirror, and the note in which he wrote about the sorry state of man that allows strangers to spray seed on passers-by, those made me pause in discomfort. Good! I love that! Plus, I don't know how many people noticed it, but I swear that during the London scene, just before you're chased, the man-pig raping someone hidden behind 3 boxes. I made sure it wasn't just a first impression either. I am pretty sure that that was the intention behind those movements, because they lacked any eating sound effect that were actually in the other ones.
Seriously, what are you doing?
Now that disturbed me. Killing the nameless people I'd never seen before, sure, it would be horrible in real life, but I'd seen that way too often to be affected. Even the part about killing the kids. I felt a bit, but it wasn't very much since I'd heard it too often in books and movies and so on. But when they brought in sex, that's what made a piggy out of me. I loved that, and I felt that the decision was one of their smartest decisions. But okay, I have to get on with some more negative points because I feel there's still a few more to discuss. I want to talk about the final part of the defense for this game that I've heard, the plot being awesome. Okay, I don't think my disapproval for this is very strong. It's not a very potent argument, nor is it anything but purely subjective. I thought the plot was okay. Not as good as the original, maybe, but okay. This is probably because I was very interested in the Agrippa subplot in the original. I found that part was so very interesting. Interaction with the Shadow and Wigner? I forgot the name, I'm sorry. But anyway, I was confused by this game's plot, but honestly, the original was also very confusing too. Both of them lacked in much explanation. Both require lots of research, and even still, there's plenty of interpretation and speculation required. The main problem is just that the other failures didn't inspire me to put as much effort into researching the plot as I felt in the last game. Justine here is my big exception. I am an obsessed nerd that knows Justine like the back of my hand, I swear. I just don't think that the plot alone is enough to carry a game like Amnesia Machine for Pigs. So I think the game could have been scary, with good gameplay, and a good plot. For instance, there are plenty of games that are scary and also have the gameplay and the good deep plot. For instance, take the original BioShock. That had a little bit of choice too, not the best exactly, but wonderful scares, and the twist at the ending was amazing. Take Silent Hill. I loved interpreting the symbolism in that, and it was just damn
Creepy. Oh man, the monster design in that game was absolutely phenomenal. Those are some of the most creative game monsters you're going to ever see, and I still adore looking at fan art of that kind of thing. Or take, for instance, System Shock and System Shock 2. Oh man, the twist in that was great, and I don't think many people saw that coming. And that's just one example of so many different games. Had the scares, the gameplay, and the plot, and I don't think they had to sacrifice anything in order to get those three together.
And also, a very tiny point. It lacks the replay value that the first and the DLC had. And I'm not saying that the originals actually had very much. They didn't have very much, but in this game, none of your choices affect the gameplay. And I love that kind of stuff. This one had no multiple endings or anything. The one experience of the plot is the only experience you can have. And that kind of bummed me out on top of everything else, because even though the last games barely included it, I liked it. So in conclusion, yes, I would agree with you. Machine for Pigs has a decent plot. But no, I don't think that makes it a good game, because I dislike just about every other aspect. There are plenty of great games that manage to have a good plot and also good gameplay and etc. For that reason, I simply can't say this game was very good, even if I can't argue with that kind of defense. Well, that's about all I can think of to say about this game. It was a rather disappointing installment in the Amnesia series, if you can call it that. It does have some merit, and a few of the decisions were very good, I think. But I don't think I can overall say I enjoyed it all that much. Certainly not as much as I was expecting. And really,